Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Because I'm not staying in very suitable conditions, I am not as prolific as I used to be in producing the videos that I believe will be pivotal and critical to shaping our present and our future. But as our people say, mmanya fu onye ọma obe ugwu. Baron Roy is one of the few Igbo intellectuals I take their writings seriously. And when I saw something he put up this morning, I felt I should respond. Because for one, I have access to him. Occasionally we communicate, we like each other's posts, we hail each other on Facebook, so I can reach out to him. I know many others that believe they belong to the elite class, and of course, from their time of their ancestors to today, they are not elites, but they believe they are. So they look for the flavors, the Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, the Okonji Iweala, the ex-governor, the ex-senator to only associate with, and shame on them. But I am Baron, we communicate as fellow Igbo intellectuals. So when I saw what he wrote, the Chinese model, I don't believe in democracy for Nigeria anymore. I prefer the model of the Chinese PRC. Let's run it like the Chinese Communist Party, govern mainland China. I'm sick and tired of the insanity we practice here. The current model mirrors that of the CCP. Let's clean it up, make it official, get the laws right, and run it like the Chinese do. In other words, Baron, my brother, believes that Nigeria has only a problem with government. Baron does not know that Nigeria has a problem that every Igbo should stay awake thinking about Igbo problem. And I felt I should respond robustly to him. So I first of all wrote, I'm worried. Why? If Baron Roy have had him addressed as a doctor, which makes me think he has a PhD, and I can attest that he's very intelligent. I know that people who did not finish high school in Nigeria are addressed as doctor, and they don't say, stop addressing me as a doctor, I'm not a doctor. But I believe that Baron Roy could have earned a PhD, which means he's entitled to be addressed as doctor. And I'm worried that if he can't be focused on the Igbo predicament, but would rather be riveted and obsessed by Nigeria and his affairs, we are in trouble. Because if people like Baron Roy are not thinking about the Igbo problem, but are rather thinking about the Nigerian problem, the arena, the field is left for the people that social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube have made intellectuals, Igbo intellectuals. And they are emboldened now, they are encouraged to continue their devastating attacks against the Igbo people, because these medias I have mentioned have been monetized. If you can say all sorts of irresponsible things about Igbos, help to share wrong information, you could get money for doing that. For example, if you could get 2,000 likes by sharing the nonsense that the Igbos were prehistoric people, that they existed before Adam, that they existed before the world was created, you might make money from this. When people like Baron Roy are not discussing the Igbos, the people that are into this discuss the Igbos, and whatever they put out there are what our grandchildren and great-grandchildren will read. If your great-grandchild comes into the world and learns that before humans were created, that the Igbos existed, your great-grandson will believe that, because as far as I'm concerned, Adam means human being. But the person that sent this falsehood that has magnetized thousands of Igbos or millions of Igbos did not even know that Adam meant human being. That what she was saying was that Igbos existed before humans were created. Now here it comes. If Nigeria goes the Chinese way, you as an Igbo person, Baron, you again as an Igbo person, the Igbo people will be the Tibet. The Tibetans are an ethnic group in Nigeria that the Han Chinese occupy their lands, claiming that they are the same people, but they are different people. And the Tibetans went into exile. No form of government has favored the Igbos. The Igbos did not get good positions in the military dispensation. Nigeria agreed to have a rotational presidency. When it was the son of the Igbos, it was scrapped. So if you go the Chinese way, not every Chinese is giving his or her dues under the PRC in the Communist Party. If every Chinese was giving his or her dues, the Tibetans will not be saying that their sovereignty was taken away from them. So Nigeria has a problem. And that problem is the Igbo problem. That is the problem Igbo should be riveted on. Nigeria is a regular and normal country, which has only one problem, called the Igbo problem. Igbo should stop expecting Nigeria to run faster than Nigeria is supposed to run. Nigerians are not complaining that their country is not working. Igbo should rather see that Igbo society is not working. Igbo society is not working. If Igbo society is working, I do not think that the most important thing for Igbo senators to stage a walkout over is the immortalization of Humphrey Mosu. Yeah, Humphrey Mosu should be immortalized because he contributed to the march towards, quote, democracy in Nigeria. But Dr. Nnamdi Azikiwe was the person that single-handedly got independence for Nigeria. Are you sure that Igbo senators know this? No less a person than General Babangida has come out and exculpated the Igbos as the guilty party in the coup, as the party that was responsible for staging the coup of 1966, which was a justification for the near annihilation of the Igbo people. Have the Igbo senators called on Nigeria to at least apologize? Don't pay reparations, Nigeria is broke. But say, we are sorry. There was no basis for saying that there was an Igbo coup, which led to the coup of 1966 July, which triggered the secession, because the Igbos felt the only way we could stay alive was to stay on our own, and the outcome was genocide. The Igbo senators have not done this. The Igbo senators want to appear relevant, so they went into immortalization of Humphrey Mosu. Yeah, if Nigerians want him to be immortalized, good. But there are other pressing things. No system of government will favor Igbos until Igbos begin to tackle the Igbo problem. By the way, a British journalist was the first person to use the term Igbo problem. On serious Igbos will not really look at the history I'm giving them now. They will rather begin to say that the British journalist should have said Igbo, IGBO, instead of Igbo, IBO. They will face the trivials. That is also a problem that has to be solved. That was in the 1960s. It was the British that noticed that Nigeria has an Igbo problem. But Igbos are not interested. Igbos are not thinking about that problem. That was in the 60s. Not even sure our fathers saw the regular anti-Igbo pogroms as a problem. There were periodic massacres of Igbos. And the British looked at it and said, this was similar to what we saw in Europe, where the Jews were periodically killed. The problem of the Igbos is that they don't really know about or take this Igbo problem seriously. Meanwhile, it is one of the two factors that is gradually grinding the Igbo people into the dust. The Igbo problem has become multifaceted now. Initially, it was seen as hostility coming from Nigerians, but it has become multidimensional now. Igbos are fighting themselves. That is why the Igbos could wake up, some Igbos could wake up and invent a history that they existed before humans were created. What they received from their best was that they came from Israel, which would have made the world to look and see the anti-Semitic motivations for their mistreatment. But they are not thinking of that. They can solve their problems, and people that can solve their problems are told to turn away. We are not Israelites. We are Igbo. We existed before Adam. So the hostility they face, the mistreatment they face, the persecution they face has no name. And it is grinding the people into a dust. As at today, they are not taken serious anywhere. That was why the rotational presidency was scrapped when it was their turn. If it was the turn of the Yorubas and you take it off the table, you have a lot of questions to answer. Of course, if it is the turn of the Fulanis or the Hausas or the Ijaw, you would not dare to even take it off the table. But the Igbos have become irrelevant and they don't know. There is a solution. The only solution, there is only one solution. The Igbos should start studying and returning to doing what I call authentic Israelite biblical omenana. That is omenana. I call it authentic Israelite biblical omenana because suffering from PTSD, a lot of Igbos now call what are actually anti-omenana. They call all of them omenana. So I become very, very explicit by saying that it is that omenana that you find in the Hebrew Bible and that does not run counter to the Hebrew Bible, because an Igbo goes and brings a charm, calls it a goddess today, or calls it a god. He tells you he's doing omenana because it is not Christianity. Christianity has come and defined religion for the Igbos, become the epicenter of the Igbo society. So everything that the Igbos do that is not Christianity, especially if it is the bad ones, Christianity defined them as omenana. So it's very, very cogent and important now to tell the Igbo the real omenana, and the real omenana is that omenana that is found in the Hebrew Bible that doesn't run contrary to the Hebrew Bible. And by the way, the only term you would find fitting the category called religion and culture, the category is called religion and culture in the Hebrew Bible itself, is omenana. Translate omenana to English, what you have is the things, the religion and culture you will do in the land. Go to Deuteronomy 6:1, read carefully in every language. What you would find is things you will do in the land. That is omenana. So, Baron, if you listen to this, do a turnaround. What I told you is the only solution. There are no other solutions. Because if the Igbos don't return to omenana, they would not even be a people, let alone be one people. And they must be one people to be able to face their problems as one people. And if they are not one people, ultimately, if they are not a people, ultimately, they will end up in the dustbin of history. There are no two ways about it. We are seeing this happening before our eyes. I was astounded when a friend of mine began to refer me to the ethnicities that are actually Igbo in rivers. In other words, when we talk about Igbo land, we can say that fully more than 2/6 of the land that was historically Igbo land are no longer part of what we know as Igbo land today. And so are the people that live on those lands. How do people disappear? How do people disappear? People disappear because there are other peoples waiting to assimilate them. And for those who will take this very seriously, there are people waiting to assimilate the Igbos. That was why the Oni of Ife ignored the historical connections between the Yoruba and the Hausa Fulani. He has never talked about it for a single time, but he's obsessed with the Igbos. 24 hours, he's making up stories about about the Igbos having been forged in Yoruba land. Of course, we know it's false. The cradle of the Igbo people in Nigeria or in West Africa is Igbo land. If there were Igbos who had anything to do with what we know as Yoruba land today, it was why those Igbos were migrating from the land of Israel that they may have passed some of the territories that eventually became Yoruba land. When those Igbos passed there were no Yoruba people then. The Yoruba people had not migrated from Egypt and Arabia. You know, they are descendants of the Canaanites, those Canaanites that also lived on the land of Israel, that were neighbors of the Israelites. That is why you find some of their words similar to some Igbo words. They were descendants of those Canaanites, some Egyptians, and some people we will call Arabs today. So that is the connection, or that is the probable connection between Igbos and the land called Yoruba land today. But this has not deterred the Oni of Ife, because he would like some Igbos. If he gets some Igbos, his realm, his empire becomes larger and larger. Ladies and gentlemen, have a nice day.